Hello, my name is Lena Morris, and I used to believe that time heals everything. But time doesn't heal betrayal. It only teaches you how to hide it better. I've been a flight attendant for almost 8 years now, long enough to master the art of pretending. Pretending to smile, pretending to care, pretending that nothing in my life has ever gone wrong. But tonight, inside the hum of Gate 47 Amperes, I wasn't pretending anymore. Tonight wasn't about hospitality or safety demonstrations. It was about justice, my kind of justice. The delay had just been announced, 45 minutes due to a technical inspection. The passengers groaned in unison, some rolling their eyes, others typing furiously on their phones to complain. I stood by the service door, hands folded neatly in front of me, my uniform crisp and perfect. To anyone watching, I was calm, polite, just another airline employee doing her job. But inside, every nerve was alive, every sense alert. This delay wasn't an inconvenience, it was a countdown. Outside the terminal windows, the rain was steady, streaking the glass in silver lines. The aircraft sat motionless, its white body gleaming under the floodlights. The captain thought we were waiting for clearance from maintenance. That's what I told him. In reality, there was nothing wrong with the aircraft. I had made sure of that. The problem was never mechanical, it was personal. I'd planned this evening down to the smallest detail. The catering truck had arrived 10 minutes earlier than scheduled because I'd arranged it myself through a contact at the base. The sealed beverage carts, the pre-packed meals, even the passenger manifest, all of it had been quietly altered over the last 2 weeks. No one questioned me. Flight attendants handle last-minute adjustments all the time. That's the beauty of aviation trust. People assume you're part of the routine. When I first spotted him earlier that afternoon, standing at the check-in counter with his suitcase and a smug half-smile, it felt like the floor tilted beneath me. I recognized him instantly, even though it had been years. His name was Victor Hale, former corporate lawyer, wealthy, arrogant, and ruthless. He was the man who destroyed my sister's life. She'd worked under him as a junior associate at his firm, young and ambitious, trying to prove herself. He manipulated her, humiliated her, and when she tried to report him, he crushed her career and reputation. The case never went public. She couldn't take the pressure. I still remember finding her that night, an empty apartment, a note, and silence that never left me. Victor resigned quietly, moved cities, and lived freely, while my sister was buried with her dignity. I'd been waiting 5 years for a chance to see him again. I never thought it would happen on one of my flights. But fate can be poetic that way. When I saw his name on the passenger list, Victor Hale, seat 2 Amperes, I knew I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. The delay gave me control of time. The passengers were stuck, the crew grounded, and no one could leave without clearance. Perfect conditions for what I had to do. I glanced at my reflection in the galley mirror. My face looked calm, almost serene, but my heart thudded with quiet rage. I adjusted my scarf and checked my watch, 30 minutes into the delay. He was probably in the lounge, sipping whiskey and charming strangers with the same arrogance that once fooled my sister. I'd already made sure his boarding pass would scan incorrectly on the first attempt. That would buy me more time. Every part of this setup had to feel like a coincidence. The catering mix-up, the delayed refueling, the communication glitch between gate control and the cockpit, all of it was fiction, designed by me. I'd learned enough about the system to manipulate it without raising suspicion. You don't need access to classified codes or hacking skills, you just need to know people, and I did. I had a friend in ground operations who owed me a favor. A quiet message from me that morning, something about needing a delay for safety verification, and the paperwork was already filed before noon. No one ever double-checks an internal delay request when it comes from a flight crew member citing maintenance oversight. I knew the codes, the forms, the jargon. By the time the passengers began lining up for reboarding, I could feel the tension thickening in the air. The flight was late, the crew was tired, and the captain was irritated. He didn't like delays any more than the passengers did, but I stayed patient. Revenge de mon patience. When Victor finally appeared at the gate, I watched him from behind the service counter. He looked older, but not by much. Same confident stride, same expensive coat, same expression that said he was used to getting his way. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent without even making eye contact. His voice was smooth, polite, and cold. He didn't recognize me. That was the best part. I'd served hundreds of passengers since the last time I saw him. To him, I was just another face in uniform, offering coffee and asking about seatbelts. But to me, he was the face that haunted every quiet night. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. The moment had finally arrived. The flight would board soon, and once that door closed, everything that followed would be under my control. From the galley, I would decide what was heard, what was delayed, and what would finally be revealed. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not because I was about to hurt him, but because he would finally have to face the truth. He had spent years hiding behind power and money, but on this flight, at 30,000 feet, those things wouldn't matter. The irony wasn't lost on me. How many times I'd smiled through safety announcements about oxygen masks and emergency exits while planning something far more dangerous in silence. Not for chaos, not for destruction, but for closure. The delay was nearly over now. The captain's voice came through the intercom, announcing that the issue had been resolved and boarding would resume shortly. I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection one last time, and whispered under my breath, "It's time." As the passengers began to file in, Victor among them, I greeted each one with the same warm smile I'd practiced 1,000 times. When he reached me, I met his eyes just long enough to see the faint flicker of recognition, something uncertain, buried deep. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Hale," I said softly, scanning his pass. "We appreciate your patience." He nodded, distracted, unaware that patience was the one thing he was about to run out of. The ground delay was over. The real flight was about to begin. He took his seat in 2 amperes, right by the window, the same confident posture I remembered from old photos my sister had shown me years ago. Victor Hale always carried himself like he owned every room he walked into. Even on a delayed flight surrounded by frustrated passengers, he looked untouched by inconvenience. His phone was already out, his voice low but sharp as he spoke to someone on a call about closing numbers and contract revisions. Some things never change. I moved down the aisle, greeting passengers as if nothing unusual was happening, though my mind was entirely on him. Every gesture, every glance was deliberate. The galley was my control center, but the cabin was my stage. I had to play my role perfectly until it was time to shift from performance to revelation. Victor didn't recognize me, and that worked in my favor. Back when it all happened, my sister was the one who worked at his firm. I was invisible to him then, and I needed to stay invisible now, at least until it mattered. His arrogance made it easy. Men like him never noticed the people they consider beneath them. As I checked the overhead bins, I listened to the murmur of conversation. He was talking to the woman in 2B, a young tech executive heading to Frankfurt for a business summit. She was polite, interested, and laughing a little at his dry humor. It was the same routine: charm, confidence, dominance. Watching it unfold made my stomach tighten, but I forced my smile to stay intact. People think revenge is loud and fiery. It isn't. It's quiet, methodical, and terrifyingly calm. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to expose him. I'd spent weeks digging through old records, social media, and contacts from my sister's firm. What I found confirmed everything I'd suspected. He hadn't changed. Different company, same pattern. Multiple complaints from female employees, all quietly settled. The firm's HR director, whom I managed to contact anonymously, admitted off the record that Victor had influence in all the right places. No charges, no consequences, just a series of silenced women and one destroyed life, my sister's. I watched as he leaned back in his seat, sipping the complimentary champagne I'd personally placed in his glass. The irony was almost poetic. He was comfortable, relaxed, completely unaware that everything around him, the timing, the service, the delay, was a setup. When the boarding finished, I closed the cabin door and gave the captain the thumbs up. The engines roared to life, a familiar vibration through the floor. Passengers buckled up, and I made my way to the front galley for takeoff prep. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady during the announcements. Years of training had taught me how to sound calm, no matter what was happening inside. Once we reached cruising altitude, the routine service began. Drinks first, then meals. It was the perfect cover for what I needed to do. From the galley, I accessed the onboard Wi-Fi control unit, something I wasn't technically allowed to touch. But I'd done my research. A few commands could reroute the internal connection to send one specific file when triggered. That file contained the evidence. Screenshots, emails, and voice messages, all proof of what Victor had done. I'd uploaded it to a private server, that would send it automatically to every passenger's device the moment I pressed transmit. But timing was everything. I didn't want the file to go out yet, not until Victor revealed a little more of himself. I needed his own words, his arrogance, recorded live. So I walked up to him. "Mr. Hale, can I get you anything else?" I asked, polite and professional. He looked up, meeting my eyes briefly. There was no recognition. "Another drink, please. Whiskey, neat." "Of course," I said. As I poured, I left my small audio recorder disguised as a crew pen on the tray table beside him. He started talking again to the woman next to him, his voice smooth but laced with superiority. "The thing about business," he was saying, "is that people who complain never last. You have to know when to shut up and play along if you want to succeed." I watched her smile awkwardly, unsure how to respond. He chuckled, swirling his glass. "It's the same with employees. Some people just can't handle pressure. They make accusations when they can't keep up." Every word was poison, and I captured it all. From the galley, I could see his reflection in the glass panel. He looked completely at ease, unaware that his own words were sealing his fate. The delay that had started everything now made perfect sense to me. It wasn't bad weather or bad luck. It was destiny giving me one final window. The captain's voice came through the intercom, announcing turbulence ahead. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Most passengers settled into silence, while I used the moment to retrieve the recorder unnoticed. I slipped it into my pocket, heart pounding. For a moment, I hesitated. What if this went wrong? What if the file failed to send, or worse, it traced back to me? But then I thought of my sister, the messages she sent before she gave up, her words echoing in my head. Asterisk, he'll never face consequences. He always wins. Asterisk, not this time. I returned to my seat in the jump seat area near the front, the soft glow of the control panel lighting my face. I opened the system, entered the sequence, and hovered my finger over transmit. My hand trembled slightly. I wasn't just exposing him, I was exposing everything, his crimes, his company, his carefully crafted image. Before I pressed it, I looked through the curtain. He was laughing again, the same hollow, self-satisfied laugh that used to haunt my dreams. That was enough. I pressed the button. The signal went out instantly, invisible, silent, unstoppable. Within seconds, every passenger's device received a ping, a shared folder titled, "The Truth About Victor Hale." Inside it were documents, voice notes, and messages revealing years of abuse and corruption. Confusion spread through the cabin like a wave. People looked at their phones, whispering, frowning. The woman beside Victor gasped, staring at her screen. He noticed her expression, frowned, and looked at his own device. I watched his face shift, from confidence to confusion to dread. He looked up, scanning the cabin, his eyes landing briefly on me. This time, recognition flickered, not of who I was, but that I was the only one standing still while the rest of the world turned on him. He rose from his seat, demanding to know what was happening, but it was too late. The evidence was already out. The delay, the setup, the entire plan, it had all led to this. I turned away, keeping my expression neutral as the passengers started murmuring louder. I didn't need to watch his downfall. I'd already seen enough. For the first time in years, I felt something close to release. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't a victory. It was the quiet relief of knowing that finally the truth was airborne and there was no bringing it back down. The galley had always been my comfort zone. It's where flight attendants spend most of their time, behind the curtain, unseen, managing chaos with quiet precision. Tonight, it became my control room. The hum of the equipment, the soft rattle of cups, the faint scent of brewed coffee, all of it masked the tension sitting beneath my skin. I wasn't just serving passengers, I was running an operation. After the file had been sent, the cabin fell into confusion. Whispers turned into gasps, gasps into questions. I could hear them from behind the galley curtain. Is this real? Who sent this? Oh my God, it's him. Each voice was a ripple in the storm I'd started. Victor was still in his seat, frozen at first, then restless. He was talking to the flight purser, demanding answers. "Someone hacked my device," he said, voice raised just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "This is illegal. Do you understand?" His confidence was cracking. The woman in 2B had moved away slightly, avoiding eye contact. I kept my back turned to the cabin, my movements steady, controlled. A good flight attendant never looks panicked, even when everything is falling apart. I began organizing the drink cart, each bottle lined up, each tray aligned, because I needed the familiarity to keep my hands from shaking. The captain called from the cockpit, asking what was happening. I told him there was a passenger issue that I was managing. He trusted me, and that was my advantage. The crew didn't question me. They knew me as calm, reliable Lena. That reputation was my shield. In truth, nothing about this was random. The galley was the nerve center of the plane, the one place where every system could be quietly accessed or delayed. I'd learned over the years that you didn't need authority to control an aircraft, you just needed timing. When I saw Victor pacing near the lavatory, phone in hand, I knew he was trying to contact someone. He couldn't. I'd already disabled the onboard Wi-Fi relay. Technically, it was a network refresh, a function available to senior crew in case of malfunction, but it had another effect. It cut off all outgoing signals for 15 minutes. Long enough to make him sweat. He came up to the galley, red-faced, his calm facade slipping. "You," he said, pointing slightly toward me. "You work here, right? What's going on with the Wi-Fi? None of the devices is connecting." I looked at him, pretending to check my screen. "It's likely interference, sir. We're looking into it." "Fix it," he snapped. "Now." His voice was sharp, commanding, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard that tone before, years ago, when he used it on my sister in a recorded voicemail that ended her career. The same arrogance, the same entitlement. "Of course," I said calmly, turning away. My reflection in the metal cabinet showed a faint smile, not satisfaction, control. The purser walked up, concerned. "Everything okay here?" "Yes," I said quickly. "Just a connectivity issue. We'll reset the router after service." She nodded and went back to the cabin. I exhaled slowly. Every small lie had to sound effortless, believable. That was how I'd built this plan, layer by layer, lie by lie, until it became truth. I took out my service tablet. Hidden in a folder labeled Passenger Requests was another file, a recording from earlier. His voice about silencing people who complained. It was damning, and it was still being recorded. I checked the timestamp. The recorder was still active in my pocket. He didn't know I was standing inches from him, gathering every word he spoke as he muttered to himself. "This is sabotage. Someone's targeting me. They'll regret it." Sabotage. The irony of that word almost made me laugh. The cabin lights flickered slightly as turbulence hit. The captain's voice came over the intercom, asking everyone to stay seated. Victor returned to 2 amperes reluctantly, still fuming. I used the moment to step into the crew communication panel, an old system that few attendants ever touch. It allowed messages to be sent directly to ground control through the pilot's channel. Normally it was used for logistics, but I'd already prepared a message. Earlier that day, before boarding, I'd saved a file labeled Passenger Incident Report. It contained Victor's full name, his seat number, and a report of suspected illegal activity on board. I didn't sign it. I just left it under the name of the captain, who wouldn't even see it until ground control responded. I sent it. Now, as we glided above the clouds, the seeds of the trap were planted both above and below. Ground control would see the alert and flag it. When we landed, airport security would already be waiting at the gate. But I wasn't done yet. I needed him to break down, to lose control publicly. The more he fought, the deeper he'd sink. And for that, I needed one final push. I went to 2 amperes again, offering water with my usual smile. He didn't look up. His phone was still useless, his hands tied around the glass of whiskey. "Rough night?" I asked softly, just enough for him to hear. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes narrowed. "Do I know you?" My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression blank. "I don't believe so, sir." He studied my face for a moment, then shook his head. "You remind me of someone." I tilted my head, still smiling. "Maybe a passenger from another flight." He turned away, muttering something under his breath. I could feel the suspicion brewing, but that was fine. A little paranoia worked in my favor. When I walked back to the galley, my hands finally trembled. I gripped the counter to steady myself. He was close to remembering, too close. But if he did, it wouldn't matter. By then, it would be over. From the interphone, the captain's voice came again, asking if the situation was under control. I assured him it was, though my pulse said otherwise. I checked the clock. We were 40 minutes from descent. The timing was perfect. On the monitor, the onboard message system showed a response from ground control. Report received. Security will meet the aircraft upon arrival. I closed the screen and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Every part of me wanted to scream, cry, collapse, but I couldn't. Not yet. Outside the galley curtain, I could still hear him arguing quietly with the purser, insisting someone was out to get him. The other passengers watched in uneasy silence. He was unraveling, exactly as I'd hoped. In the galley, surrounded by stainless steel and the low hum of the engines, I whispered to myself, "Almost there, sis, just a little longer." Because once we landed, the truth would no longer belong to me. It would belong to everyone. The descent began quietly, but the tension inside the cabin could be felt like static in the air. The once calm flight was now wrapped in silence. No one wanted to make eye contact with the man in seat 2 amperes. His arrogance had drained away, replaced by a restlessness that betrayed the panic beneath his polished exterior. Every few seconds, Victor checked his dead phone screen, waiting for a signal that would never come. I stood in the galley, fastening my harness as the captain announced the approach. The city lights below were scattered like embers, glowing through the thin mist. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. Ground control had confirmed security would be waiting. I'd done my part. The rest was out of my hands, or so I told myself. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't ready to let go just yet. The plane shuddered slightly as the landing gear deployed. Passengers stirred, fastening seatbelts and adjusting their seats. The woman beside Victor, now pale and distant, avoided even glancing at him. Her tablet was still open, showing fragments of the files that had shaken the entire cabin. Victor tried to lean toward her, his voice low but urgent. "Listen, that information is false. Someone's framing me. You understand that, right?" She shifted away, shaking her head without a word. I watched from the jump seat, hidden behind the half-closed curtain, the faint reflection of the two of them visible in the galley mirror. His control, his greatest weapon, was gone. For the first time, I was seeing him powerless. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The captain's voice broke the tension. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." I acknowledged the call and secured the galley. Every latch clicked into place, every tray locked, every motion automatic. I'd done this hundreds of times before, but never with this much awareness, never with this much gravity in the air. As we touched down, the aircraft jolted slightly, then rolled smoothly along the wet tarmac. The wheels hissed against the rain-soaked runway. The lights of the terminal came into view. My stomach tightened. This was it. The intercom buzzed softly. "Lena, are you okay back there?" the captain asked. "Yes, Captain. All good," I replied, my voice steady. "Everything's under control." But it wasn't under control. Not yet. The engines slowed, and we taxied toward the gate. Outside the window, airport vehicles waited. Fuel trucks, baggage carts, and one unmarked security van parked a little too close to the bridge. I recognized it immediately. They were already here. Victor noticed too. He stood before the seatbelt sign turned off, scanning the window. His face had gone pale. He pressed the call button, the chime echoing through the cabin. I walked over, calm and composed. "Sir, please remain seated until we're parked at the gate," I said evenly. "Who are they waiting for?" he demanded, pointing out the window. "I'm not sure, sir," I lied. He narrowed his eyes at me. "You know something. I can tell." I gave him a polite smile, the same one I'd used 1,000 times before, and said nothing. As soon as the aircraft stopped, the captain made the usual announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is off." The cabin lights brightened. The passengers started gathering their belongings, but the front door didn't open immediately. Instead, a ground officer stepped onto the jet bridge and spoke briefly to the purser. She looked confused, then serious. Her eyes darted toward me before she nodded to the officer. "Is there a problem?" I asked quietly, already knowing the answer. "Security needs to speak with a passenger in 2 amperes before anyone disembarks," she said. I nodded slowly, pretending to be surprised. "Of course." Victor's composure cracked completely. "This is outrageous," he shouted, rising from his seat. "You can't detain me without reason." "Sir, please stay calm," I said firmly, stepping slightly closer. He turned on me, his voice shaking with fury. "You did this, didn't you? You think I don't remember you now? Your sister, what was her name? Hannah, wasn't it? The sound of her name hit me like a blow to the chest. He remembered. The moment his words left his mouth, the entire cabin froze. Every eye turned toward us. I felt the air leave my lungs, but I didn't move. My voice was quiet when I finally spoke. Yes, you remember her. He stared at me, realization spreading across his face like a shadow. You set me up. I didn't deny it. No, Mr. Hale, I didn't set you up. I just told the truth. The purser looked between us, confused and uneasy. The security officers entered then, 2 men and a woman in dark uniforms. They walked directly to Victor. Sir, we need you to come with us, one said. Victor started protesting, his voice rising again. This is all lies. She's behind this. She's the one. They cut him off gently but firmly, guiding him toward the door. He struggled, his outrage echoing through the narrow cabin, but the fight was over before it began. As they let him out, I stayed still, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. The cabin fell silent. Passengers watched through the windows as he was escorted toward the security van, rain falling hard against the glass. No one spoke. Some looked at me as if they suspected I'd been involved, others with quiet understanding. I didn't care anymore. When the last passenger disembarked, the purser turned to me. What was that about? She asked softly. Something that should have happened years ago, I said. She didn't press further. Some things didn't need explaining. The cabin was empty now, only the hum of the ventilation filling the quiet. I walked to 2 Amperes and stared at the empty seat. His glass of whiskey was still half full, the condensation dripping down the side. I picked it up, feeling the cold against my fingers. For a long moment, I just stood there. Then I carried it back to the galley and poured it out. Outside, the rain had eased, and the runway lights shimmered against the wet tarmac. Through the open door, I could see the security van pulling away, its red taillights fading into the mist. I finally exhaled. My body felt heavy, drained, but there was a strange quietness inside me. Not victory, not joy, just silence, the kind that comes after a storm. The captain came out of the cockpit. Everything all right, Lena? Yes, Captain, I said, forcing a small smile. Just another delay. He gave a tired chuckle, not realizing how much truth was buried in that line. As I walked off the aircraft, I glanced back one last time. The galley, the cabin, and the seat in 2 Amperes all looked ordinary again. To anyone else, this had been just a delayed flight. To me, it had been the night I finally landed after years of turbulence. The rain had stopped by the time I stepped into the terminal, but the air still carried that metallic scent that follows a storm. The terminal lights were bright and sterile, and the hum of arriving passengers felt distant, like I was hearing it underwater. The security van that had taken Victor away was gone. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder where he was. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt empty. Revenge never looks the way you imagine it. It's not triumphant. It's quiet, almost anticlimactic. I stood near the gate window, watching the reflection of my own face, smudged makeup, tired eyes, perfect uniform, and realized how long I'd been holding my breath. Then, the captain's voice came from behind me. Lena, ground control wants you to check in at operations. Something about an internal report. My stomach tightened. I nodded and headed toward the crew corridor, my shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe they'd traced the message. Maybe someone had seen more than I'd hoped. Inside the operations office, a duty officer sat behind a desk, cluttered with flight manifests and radio logs. He looked up when I entered. You're from Flight 417? Yes, I said carefully. He nodded and turned the monitor toward me. We received this transmission mid-flight. Thought you might want to hear it before we file it. I frowned. Transmission? He pressed play. The audio crackled to life. The sound of in-flight chatter overlaid with faint turbulence. Then came a man's voice, Victor's, strained and panicked. You don't understand, he was saying. She planned this, she set me up, this whole thing, she's one of them. Then silence. The officer looked at me. This came through one of the open channels just before landing. It was automatically recorded. He must have pressed the interphone while trying to call the cockpit. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I couldn't speak. He had accidentally broadcast his own confession, every word transmitted, stored, and logged. A final, desperate act that had turned against him. Is that going to be shared with investigators? I asked quietly. Protocol says yes. It's already in the report, the officer said, scrolling down. Looks like ground security flagged it for evidence. Guess they'll handle the rest. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. The irony hit me hard. I'd planned every detail of this operation, controlled every step, but in the end, his downfall came from his own hands, from the last words he spoke over an open line. It was poetic in a way that almost hurt. When I left the office, the terminal had thinned out. The night crew was sweeping floors, and a few stranded passengers were sleeping across empty rows of seats. The world outside was calm again. Planes taxied quietly in the distance, their lights blinking like tired eyes. I sat down near the window, unpinned my name tag, and stared at it. Asterisk, Lena Morris. Asterisk, the woman who'd waited 5 years for justice. The woman who'd built an entire plan out of grief and patience. But as I turned the small piece of metal in my hand, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. My sister wouldn't have wanted this, not like this. She believed in truth, not vengeance. What I'd done had exposed him, yes, but it had also exposed me. I'd broken every rule I swore to uphold as crew. I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. The intercom above the gate came to life with a faint hum as a new crew arrived for the next flight. I watched them check in, laughing quietly, going through the same motions I'd done 1,000 times. For them, it was just another night in uniform. For me, it was the end of something that had defined me for years. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the purser. Asterisk, asterisk. They found evidence on his device. Everything matches the files from the flight. Good work keeping calm tonight. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you. Just glad it's over. Asterisk, asterisk. But it wasn't really over. Not inside. Revenge doesn't erase the past. It just changes the weight of it. My sister was still gone, and nothing could bring her back. But maybe now, she could rest knowing the truth wasn't buried with her. I walked out of the terminal into the damp night air. The city lights glowed faintly beyond the runway. Somewhere out there, Victor was sitting in a small, windowless room, answering questions he couldn't talk his way out of. For the first time, he couldn't manipulate the story. The recording, the evidence, the transmission, it was all real, and it was all his own doing. I tilted my face toward the cold air and closed my eyes. The engines of a departing plane roared overhead, echoing through the darkness. I listened until the sound faded, leaving only the hum of the runway lights. "Goodbye, Hannah," I whispered. "We're finally clear for takeoff." Then I walked toward the staff exit, the first light of dawn glinting off the wet pavement. Behind me, Flight 417 sat at the gate, quiet, ordinary, just another plane ready for boarding. But for me, it would always be the night the truth took flight. Hello again. Before I wrap this up, I want you to picture the kind of silence that follows after years of noise, the kind that doesn't comfort you, but reminds you that something is finally over. That's what I felt when I walked out of the airport that night. For 5 years, I had lived with a ghost. My sister's death was ruled accidental, but I knew better. Victor had buried the truth under lies, money, and connections. I'd spent years building my way into the same world he moved through, the aviation network, the airline, the procedures, everything. I learned how the system worked so I could one day break it in just the right way. And now that day had come and gone. The evidence was in the hands of investigators. The confession had been recorded. The man who destroyed my family was behind bars. But there was no joy in it. No applause, no cinematic ending, just quiet exhaustion. I rented a small apartment near the coast after I resigned from the airline. I told them I needed personal time, though I knew I wouldn't be back. My uniform stayed in its garment bag, perfectly pressed, like a memory I wasn't ready to destroy. Some nights, I'd take it out and hang it by the window, watching how the moonlight caught the wings on the badge. It reminded me that even something designed to represent freedom could become a cage if you wore it long enough. News about Victor's case spread slowly, tucked between crime reports and financial scandals. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud, coercion, and obstruction. The story mentioned anonymous evidence from an internal airline source, but my name never appeared. That was part of the plan. I wanted justice, not recognition. One afternoon, I got a letter. No return address, just my name typed neatly across the front. Inside was a short note. Asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a uniform. Thank you for flying with courage. Asterisk, asterisk. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. Someone inside the system had known. Maybe the purser, maybe the captain, maybe someone from the operations desk who saw through the technical errors I'd reported that night. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was over. I started volunteering at a local shelter near the coast, helping displaced women find jobs. Many had stories like mine. Different details, same pain. When they talked about revenge, I didn't tell them not to feel it. I just told them to be careful what it costs. Because when you dedicate your life to vengeance, you start to forget what peace feels like. Sometimes I still dream of that night on the tarmac. The red lights blinking against the rain, the low rumble of the engines, the voice on the radio confessing what I'd waited years to hear. I wake up before the plane takes off. Maybe that's my mind's way of reminding me. I got what I wanted, but I never really moved on. One morning, I drove to the old airfield outside the city, where retired aircraft sat in neat, sun-bleached rows. I stood in front of one that looked almost like the model I used to work on. Its faded paint and empty windows gave it a strange, ghostly dignity. I touched the cool metal and whispered, "You did your part." When I walked away, I didn't look back. For the first time, I didn't need to. The truth had taken flight that night, and I finally let it land.